What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. In today's episode, I'll be ranking the main characters of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 from worst to best. A couple of things should be considered when watching this video. This list is my personal opinion, so if there's a character listed who doesn't match with yours, I promise it's nothing personal. Also, this will contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen or played the game, you should probably do that now. If you don't care about spoilers, then let's move on. I'll be ranking the characters based on their importance in the story, how enjoyable they are during gameplay, and a few other things that you'll figure out later on. Also, you can use the timestamps in the description as a guide. With that all said, I hope you all enjoy the video, and don't forget to subscribe.
And I'm Senna. I don't look it, but I can lift far more than my own weight.
Senna by herself is a fine character. Her cheerful and generally upbeat attitude does add a nice sense of levity in the story when needed. She even has her fair share of highs and lows throughout the campaign and proves to be a viable member in combat. However, when you put her next to the other 5 members, Senna's importance starts to feel like it shifts from main character to important side character status. For example, you have to go out of your way to find her hero side story, where the other members' side stories are actually given during the main story. And even when you do activate her quests, Senna takes a backseat for most of her own story. The actual game chooses to focus on Gondor and Shania's relationship rather than properly develop Senna's character. It doesn't help that her most common post-battle quote is mediocre at best. Senna may be the girl with the gall, but unfortunately her shortcomings cause her to land in last place.
I'm Tyon. For this mission, I was assigned as support for the Off-Seer.
Alright, I know I'll get some flack for this, but hear me out. Tyon is admittedly a very good character. In fact, he's got an incredibly fleshed out backstory which gives context to why he's always so adamant on having the best possible strategy as a tactician. It's not just limited to his backstory either, because we get to see how he grows from a shy, by-the-book character to someone who casually makes tea for his friends and comrades. Tyon also has the honor of having some of the best underrated scenes in the game. For example, when learning about the miracle of childbirth, Tyon's reaction stands out more than anyone else's, at least in my opinion. Now you might be wondering why he's only at number 5 after singing so many praises, and honestly, it's because he's not the most fun to play as. Tyon, being a support character, is mostly focused on healing and buffing everyone else. His auto attacks with the Mondo are slow, meaning his arts take so much time to charge, and you can't stagger attacks like you could in Xenoblade 2, which makes charging Tyon's arts that much slower. All in all, Tyon's a great character for the story, but I just wish he was more engaging during gameplay.
My name's Lance. My special move? You figure it out.
On the surface, Lance is a comic relief jokester character. As a matter of fact, he seems a lot like Reyn from Xenoblade 1. But as you progress through the story, you come to discover that Lance is basically Reyn, but with depth and layers. Being a member of the Kavesi trio, we actually get to see a lot more of Lance's backstory than we ever did with Reyn. And through that, we get to see why Lance is so driven to protect his friends. We also get to piece together that he uses his humor as a coping mechanism of sorts to deal with past trauma. A majority of his arc throughout the story is actually coming to terms with what happened in the past and carrying on the legacy of his friends. Much like Senna, Lance gets his time to shine in the spotlight in both cutscenes and during gameplay. Speaking of which, Lance is a beast in combat. His arts, while they take a while to charge, pack a mean punch. He can also take quite the beating given he is the main tank of the party, and as such he can also handle aggro management incredibly well. Lance is among my top 3 most played characters, however he still falls a little flat when it comes to the story. This is why he lands in number 4.
Uni's the name. Special Forces Unit, Colony 9. My hobby? Collecting fortune clovers, I guess.
I've decided to put Uni at number 3 for a few reasons, but I'll go over the negative reasons first this time. For starters, I think using her in combat is fine for the most part. I've definitely got more used to using her instead of Tyon as the designated healer. It feels like her auto attacks also come out a little faster, however since she's part of Team Keves, her arts charge on a timer rather than a certain amount of hits like Team Agnes. That being said, she's still a viable member in combat. Where she really shines, however, is in the story. Her character breaks the archetype of the high Entia. Instead of being very posh and reserved, Uni has a sharp tongue, a foul mouth, and is very quick to anger. That doesn't make her a bad character though, as she has an abundance of her own highs and lows in the story. In Chapter 3, for example, there's a cutscene where Uni finds an old husk with her dog tag, and after putting 2 and 2 together, her whole world collapses. Watching this unfold for the first time, I was speechless. I'm not going to spoil anything else from her story, but I would highly recommend watching and experiencing it for yourself if you haven't already.
My name's Noah. Colony 9, Special Forces Unit. Oh, and this is my passion. Someday I'd like to play my own melodies.
Noah is quite possibly one of the best male protagonists created in the Xenoblade series. However, there are reasons why he's only the runner-up of this list. When the game first introduces him, Noah comes off as the most Shulk-like character out of the Kevis bunch. He's pretty calm, collected, but also driven on fulfilling his purpose as an Off-Seer, sending off soldiers from both sides regardless of what his team thinks. And in typical Xenoblade fashion, Noah is also the wielder of a special red sword like Shulk and Rex. However, unlike the otherworldly abilities of the Monado or the Aegis, Noah's blade's gimmick is that it's really sharp. Don't let that undersell it, however. His sword is a little more than meets the eye. Speaking of which, since Noah is the general protagonist of Xenoblade 3, that also makes him one of the easier and more flexible characters to play as. It's always satisfying to break an enemy and cancel into an air slash. But gameplay isn't everything. His importance in the story is there at all times, which comes with the gift of some of the best scenes in the entire trilogy. Noah's drive throughout the main story is to find the person responsible for creating Ionius the way it is and try to restore the old way of life, that being the natural way of life. It's a little dark if you think about it. He's also way more fleshed out than Shulk and Rex combined, since we get to see detrimental points of all his past. The ending of Chapter 5 and the beginning of Chapter 6, for example, stood out as two of the greatest sequences the series has seen thus far. Harry McIntyre's performance as Noah was absolutely phenomenal, and it really sparked and rekindled my own passion for voice acting.
I'm called Mio. I'm an Off-Seer in Colony Gamma's musical unit. I can do the 100 metri in 7 seconds. Pretty quick on my toes, I guess.
So this brings us to the end of our list, where I've decided to put Mio up at the top. I'll try to get through Mio's section as best I can without sounding like too much of a simp though. Personally, she's my favorite of the new bunch of characters for a multitude of reasons. She's complex, fun to play as, and has the most raw emotional scenes in the entire game. But before we tackle Mio's depth, let's talk a little bit about her gameplay. Like I said, Mio is extremely fun to play as. Her playstyle is mainly focused on drawing aggro while also evading enemy attacks using her arts. In other words, she's an agile tank. Canceling her auto attacks into her arts for extra art recharge is always really satisfying to pull off. I think her most satisfying combo is using Butterfly Blade to draw the enemy's aggro and then chaining that into an Air Fang for critical damage. Moving on to her story, Mio's about as important as a character can get in a Xenoblade game. Similar to Noah, she's got an extremely rich backstory which gets fleshed out to the max during the main story, but it doesn't stop there. Earlier I mentioned how Chapter 5 had two of the best scenes in the whole trilogy, and a huge part of that was because of Mio. Not only do we see her locked up and all alone in her cell, but we also witness Mio come to terms with the fact that there's no way out during her final month. Due to being in her late 10th term, Mio's big story arc for a majority of the game is racing against the clock and trying to buy more time. Seeing her reduced to essentially a husk of herself in a place where time is against her is honestly heartbreaking. It stings even more as the game cuts between Mio's cell and the rest of the party, watching them exhaust every possible method of breaking out of their cell. However, the real punch in the face is the scene that follows, but since I don't want to spoil the entire game, that's best saved for another time. After experiencing those scenes for the first time, I said to my good pal RJ's Arcade that playing this game was more like watching a movie. The whole sequence was a beautifully painful experience, and even after replaying that scene while knowing all the twists, it's still the most gut-wrenching scene yet. And that's all I've got for today. Like I said at the beginning, I rank these based on my own personal opinion. If there was someone I put on the list who didn't match with yours, let me know your reasoning in the comments. Maybe we can have a discussion about it. If you enjoyed this video, you can do me a huge favor by liking the video and subscribing. Be sure to comment your ideas for future videos down below, I read every single one. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, I've been your host, signing off.